Hey everybody, it's Charles from HumbleMechanic.com. Today, we're talking electrical problems, high mileage Passats, airbags, and more. This is episode 179 of the Humble Mechanic Podcast. All right, in order to get a question on a show like this, be sure to email me, charles@humblemechanic.com. Be sure to put question for Charles in the subject, just like it says down below. Ask your question right at the top, hit that enter button a few times for me, and then give me the details of your question. That helps me out so much. When I'm answering your question and reading through the details, I can actually know what the question is while I'm reading the details. Also, if you don't hear or see your question on a show like this, be sure to check out the quick videos playlist on YouTube. That is where I generally take my iPhone, or perhaps after I shoot this show, and answer one question per video. All right, let's talk about the sponsor of the day, which is CRP Automotive. CRP deals in a ton of OE maintenance and repair parts, timing belt kits, suspension components, and even fluids. In fact, they make the factory DSG fluid for Volkswagen and Audi. So check them out at crpautomotive.com. And real quick before I get into your questions, remember that January 31st, 2017 is the official launch date of the Crew membership program. If you want to learn more about that, hang tight. All the details will be out soon. It's going to be an amazing program for you guys to get exclusive content, exclusive discounts, training manuals, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Stay tuned because I'm going to be hitting it pretty hard and talking to you guys about it because I want you guys to be part of this club. The first 100 members, remember, we're going to be doing something extra special for, so keep your ears open, pay attention to Facebook, pay attention to your email, pay attention to Instagram, and I'll be sure to let you guys know all about it. All right, with all that wrapped up, let's get into the questions. First one comes from Andrew. I have a 99 Beetle with 236,000 miles on it. My e-brake light flashes if I rev the engine or go to take off. My brake fluid levels are good. I just replaced the rear calipers and pads and rotors and bled the system. I've also checked the e-brake switch and the reservoir sensor. That seems to be fine. I replaced my plug wires because they were arcing. I would like to know what your thoughts are on this. So I have actually seen this problem a couple of different times, and it's been a couple of different things. The one that jumps out to me as the most prevalent thing is ground wires. There's a ground wire in the A-pillar at the bottom, right near where the dead pedal is. So there's a trim cover you'll have to remove behind that dead pedal, actually just a little forward of the dead pedal. Sorry, just a little backwards of the dead pedal. But there's a ground connection there, and I've seen that ground connection either be loose or corroded or something like that and cause this exact same thing. Also, a bad ground inside that instrument cluster harness. I've seen do that. If that ground can be an issue, that means any ground can probably be an issue and lead to this. Check your battery grounds. Check the grounds underneath the battery. That's a really common place for corrosion to build up and cause all kinds of crazy car issues. That was the thing that it used to be when you called Techline with a Mark IV problem. The first thing they would say is, check and clean the battery, the grounds under the battery, to the point where it was almost a joke, and you went ahead and did that anyway before you called them, just because you knew that was the first thing they were going to say. If you have access to a scan tool, it's never a bad idea to go ahead and scan the car, see if you have any faults related to anything with the car that you could sort of trace back to the instrument cluster or to that wiring harness behind the dash. I want to say there's also another ground connection somewhere underneath the dash on the driver's side, near the steering column, maybe on the steering column. I know the Mark Vs and 6s and B6s had that same ground connection. The Mark IVs, I'm like struggling to remember whether it's there or not. So I'm thinking ground issue, start there. Again, battery ground, grounds underneath the battery and battery tray, engine grounds, and then the ground at the A-pillar inside the vehicle are probably your most common points to have ground failures. So good luck, Andrew. I hope that it's one of those things and it's really easy to find. And hey, when you fix it, be sure to come back to this episode and post what was wrong with it and how you fixed it so that you can probably help someone else down the road. All right, next one comes from George. What's the highest mileage 1.8 turbo B5 you have seen? There's a whole lot of details, but I'm going to jam that question out. It's been in the 230,000 mile range. I own a 2000 Passat 1.8 turbo 5-speed. Had one owner for 15 years, all services done at the dealership, a reputable VW mechanic, easy for me to say. The previous owner spent over $6,000 in repairs in just 5 years before I bought it. That's actually not that abnormal for that car. That car is very expensive to maintain, had a lot of things that needed to be maintained on it. Financially, it didn't make sense, but it seems he loved the car. I got it for $280. Nice job, dude. It was not running at the time, needed 2 relays that I replaced. The car has 187,000 miles. P0411 is on, and I need to figure out what's wrong with the secondary air pump system. It also has an underheating issue. I bought a new thermostat that I'm about to change. Squeak noise around the belt came up. I purchased a stethoscope, which I used to identify where the noise was coming from. I get a kick out of running older cars forever. I want to see if I can hit at least 300,000 with 3-month, 3,000-mile oil changes. I'm paranoid. Synthetic with the giant Mobil 1 filter. Lots of little problems, but man, I love how this fella drives. Any advice in general? I'm getting a PhD in water treatment and an engineering professor, but my daily driver is my passion and hobby. So, George, bravo for getting a car for $280, jamming a couple of relays in it, and then driving it. Dude, that's awesome. So I have a huge affinity for this car, this generation of car, right? It's what I drive every day. I drive a B5.5, but by and large, it's the same thing. The crux of this car is going to be leaks and sludge. Be sure to keep that oil changed. It sounds like you got that under control. I think 3,000 miles is probably a little more than you need to, but I'm not going to hate on anybody for doing it and erring on the side of changing it too much. There's also a ton of other things that can go wrong with these cars. I did a video about the top 5 most common failures of this exact generation car. I'll be sure to link that up for you so you can check it out. I highly recommend that video. It's stuff that I've personally fixed on a lot of B5s or have had happen to my car, which again is a 1.8 turbo B5. But if you want to get 300,000 miles out of this car, I think that's pretty doable. You just got to make sure that you're taking good care of it, which it sounds like you are. If you see an oil leak or smell something burning, get it fixed right away. Because one of the other problems with this car is that people wouldn't maintain it well. They did okay, but they wouldn't maintain it well, like fixing oil leaks right away or fixing axle boots that broke right away. Those neglectful habits would actually lead to the repairs costing even more. So valve cover gaskets leaking oil, leak onto the coolant flange, and cause a coolant leak and an oil leak. Not fixing a CV boot that split would mean eventually you had to buy a new axle, which is pretty expensive. Even now they have an economy line from Volkswagen. It's still not cheap, and if you could do an $80 boot versus a $300 axle, obviously only one of those makes sense. So, dude, rock and roll, good luck. I hope that you can get it to 300,000 miles. Check. All right, next one comes from Nathan. My wife and I both drive B6 Passats, and we have never taken them to the dealership for service. We have a mechanic that doesn't specifically work on German cars, but is able to do anything we need him to do. My question for you is a VAGCOM license and cable worth the $300 to $400 price? My mechanic uses a snap-on scan tool, and for now seems to be able to see all the codes that are on both of our cars. Finally, if I buy the VAGCOM license, will I be able to read fault codes any better than my mechanic's snap-on scan tool? Thanks for reading my email. I really enjoy your YouTube videos. Nathan, thank you for that. I appreciate that. So this could be a yes, a no, somewhere in between. There's a handful of snap-on scanners out there, and honestly, most of them do a pretty darn good job of communicating with our Volkswagens. Every once in a while, you'll run into an issue that the snap-on one won't work, or the lower-end snap-on ones especially, they get a little squirrely. The older snap-on stuff where you had to like buy the actual card and put it in the scan tool to talk to European cars, that one may not be awesome, but if it's a more modern scan tool, it'll probably be okay. Now, if I owned 2 B6 Passats and I wasn't a technician or mechanic, whatever you prefer, but I was an enthusiast, I would say VAGCOM for me would be worth the money. You can buy VAGCOM that only talks to a certain number of VINs. So you can get a 3 VIN or a 10 VIN license and save a bunch of money. You can also get the whole entire VAGCOM unlocked license software, But if you're only going to be working on your cars, I really don't think you're going to be needing that. I am working on a review of the newest generation of VAGCOM HEXNet cables. They're really nice. They've done a really good job of upgrading from the other one, the first generation that I have, and the newer cables are quite a bit nicer. So now, will it read better? I want to think that it will, but remember that when it comes to pulling faults and diagnosing problems, it's not just what the computer says, right? It's not P0411 like the last question. It's your ability to interpret and run tests of that system. So P0411 is a secondary air fault that tells you the flow is too low. It could be a weak pump, clogged line, broken vacuum line, bad solenoid, all kinds of different stuff. It's what the technician or the DIYer or the repair person knows about that system that really makes what you can do with the scan tool valuable. You can do a lot with VAGCOM. Like almost anything a dealership technician can do with the factory scan tool, you can do with VAGCOM if you know what you're doing. If you don't, you're probably not going to get there. But I would say buy one. I think it's worth the money, even if it saves you, from having to go to the tech in the first place to have your codes checked. You can just plug it in. They even have the version you can use with your phone. Plug it in, go, oh, I got a P0401. It's generally this. Bad example on the B6 Passats because they didn't have secondary air. But your mechanic with a maybe inferior scan tool to talk to Volkswagens might still even be able to do better than a person that isn't educated on how all the systems work and what all these readings mean is going to be with VAGCOM. So I always recommend that if you're any kind of enthusiast or Volkswagen DIYer, you got to have a scan tool. You got to have VAGCOM. You got to look at OBD11. Whatever one you prefer, you got to have something like that, because if you want to be a DIYer in today's automotive age, you don't have a scan tool, you have eliminated a ton of things that you'll have the ability to do. So, all right, got time for one more. This one comes from Ed. Would airbags go off in a crash even when the airbag light is on, indicating an airbag problem? This is a good question. Hey Charles, I'm not quite sure if you've covered this topic in one of your previous posts. If so, could you give me the link to it? If not, here's more information. I have an '08 Touareg TDI 2.5. I don't live in the US, and the only shop I trust working on my car is the dealership. Problem is they charge a lot. Just simply check the code, not to mention possible repair. I'm planning to get it fixed, but not right away. Can I be sure that safety is not compromised if the unthinkable were to happen? Also, I've read on various forums that it could be something as simple as the seatbelt not being put on correctly and or wiring under the passenger seat. If this is so, how could I check for the problem? It's worth mentioning that the passenger side airbag can be turned on and off with a key fob. This is done by a switch in the glove box. The light on the dashboard turned on after I had switched the passenger airbag off. I've tried to get the light on the dash off by turning the passenger airbag on and off, always turning the car off first, but it is not turned off for over a month now. So, Ed, there is the official Volkswagen technician answer that I'm going to give you, and then I'm going to give you maybe a little bit of insight that may or may not help, and you may or may not like the answer. So the official answer, if you were to come to me into my dealership with an airbag light and ask me this question, I would tell you there's no way to be sure that all the airbags will behave in the manner in which they are intended if the airbag light is on. The airbag light comes on for a reason. It's telling you there's a problem. It's telling you, hey, look at me, something's wrong, fix me, notice me. And that's because they can't guarantee that. If it's the driver's steering wheel airbag and you get in a front collision, they can't guarantee that it's going to go off. It may also go off in the wrong rate. You don't know. If it's a seatbelt switch, it may not set off the airbag for that seat because it doesn't see the seatbelt buckled. So officially, no. You don't want to rely on the airbag system to go off properly when the light is on. Now, there might be a case, maybe, possibly, super maybe, disclaimer at the top, that the airbag functions absolutely fine during a crash. The problem is, how are you gonna know? The only way you're gonna know is if it's gonna function properly in a crash is to get into a crash. And we don't wanna do that. We wanna be safe. We wanna make sure that, if we have our family in our car or we loan our car to somebody, that our vehicle is as safe as it can possibly be. So when it comes to airbags, man, I typically don't play around. I typically as far off the reservation, off the book, I can go with certain things. Airbags and safety systems are not really one of them. So what you at least need to do, like right away, is get that code checked. Because yeah, it could be something underneath the seat. We used to get codes on the very early generation Tourags for the airbag in the bolsters, right? The side impact airbags, both sides. The connectors would just separate just a tiny bit and cause the light to come on. So it could be something as simple as that. It could be something simple as a seatbelt latch or the buckle. It could be the whole airbag. It could be a clock spring. There's 100 things that it could be. You don't want to put your family and your life at risk because it's one of those things that very well may be expensive. What I would do, pony up the money and get the code checked, or get something like a VAGCOM and check it yourself, or find someone local that has a scan tool that will talk to the airbag of your car and get the code checked, at least so you know what the code is. Then what you can do is you can maybe reach out to Volkswagen and say, hey, I got this, what, 08 Touareg that I'm having an airbag issue with. Can you help me out? Sometimes they help customers out with airbag issues, and sometimes they don't. It's really case by case, but man, I'd love to tell you, hey, don't worry about it. It'll function fine. That would be great. I just can't do that. I'm not willing to say that because I don't know. And all the documentation that I've ever encountered about airbags basically says if the light is on, there's no guarantee of proper functionality because the light's on for a reason. The system sees a problem. It's letting you know that it needs to be addressed. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. If you have any questions or comments, you know what to do. Hey, if you like this video, throw it a thumbs up on YouTube. I always appreciate that. You can also subscribe on YouTube or on the blog at humblmechanic.com. Don't forget to be on the lookout for the premium membership coming very, very soon. All right, guys, hey, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Drink of the day is a frosty ice water. It is actually Thursday. I'm gonna be in California this weekend doing a class, so I had to shoot the Q&A show way early. I'm actually about to jump on Facebook Live, get alerts about that. So Thursdays, 8:30 Eastern, we also do Facebook Live, so if you guys are around, be sure to catch it.